Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. In today's video we are going to learn how to draft an off-shoulder corset with sleeve. If this is something you love to learn, kindly watch this video to the end and make sure you subscribe to my channel, like and share this video. Okay, so let's get right into the video. So right here is my pattern paper and I'm going to be ruling the starting point line of 1/2 inch. So from the starting point line, I'm going to take off 5 inches. This is how off I want this top to be. Okay, so I'm going to mark 5 inches. So from 5 inches, I'm going to mark my bust point of 9.5, my under bust of 12.5, and my top length of 22 inches plus 1 inch allowance. I have 23 inches. Okay, so I'm going to mark the line on the other side and go ahead and rule it together. So after ruling it, I'll go ahead now and label it: my chest line, my bust line, under bust line, and the top line. So the next thing is to mark the nipple to nipple measurement, and half of my nipple to nipple measurement is 3.5. So on the under bust I mark 3.5. On the bust line I marked 3.5. Now on the neck area I marked 4 inches. So at the top length here I also marked 3.5. So I'll go ahead and connect all the marks together. So once that is done, I'm going to be taking 1 inch on both sides of this dart. So if you're on the big side, you can use 1.25 on both sides, or you can use 1.5 on both sides. So I'm also going to use 1 inch on both sides at the length of the blouse, and I'll also repeat the same thing at the top here. Now you can use 1/4 inch on this side and use 1 inch and 1/4 on the side that falls towards the armhole area. So it depends on what you want. So on the bust line I will come down and come up by 1/2 inch. Okay, so right now I'll go ahead and mark all of the points together. I'm just using my marker to highlight it so that we can see it properly. I'll also connect the top part as well. So you should have something like this once you are done. Just follow this step. So I'm going to connect the other parts down to the top length. So you should have something like this. So the next thing is to create the wideness of the neck, and I'm going to be using 5 inches for how wide I want the neck to be. Now the 1 inch we took away on both sides is going to be 2 inches. You are going to add it to the neckline. So 5 inches plus the 2 inches I'm taking away, I'll have 7 inches. Okay, so first off I'm going to mark the 5 inches neckline. Okay, that's the how wide you want the neck to be, and then I'm going to mark the 2 inches that intake we are taking away. So you can see what I have. So when I measure it, I'm going to have 7 inches. So I'm going to mark the 7 inches at the chest line as well. Okay, my chest line is 7.5. So I'm going to mark the neck width up to the chest line. This will enable me to know how deep I need to take the armhole curve. So right here now I'm going to take the 1/4 of the bust. All right, so once you measure the 1/4 of the bust, the dart intake we took at the top there, which is 2 inches, you add it there, plus the sewing allowance you also add it there. You repeat the same thing for the under bust. All the dart intake you add it there plus the sewing allowance, and you do the same thing at the top length. Now at the lower part of this top length, I'll be going up by 1 inch and I will slant it down to this place. Just watch what I'm doing. Okay, and if you feel you want it to be deeper than this, you can go out, you can go ahead and recurve it. So I'm recurving my by 1/2 inch again, just so that I can have, just so that that side can go up very well. So you can see what I have after marking it. So I'm also taking the armhole curve. Okay, so this is what I have. So I'm going to extend this part up. That part is going to serve as the sewing allowance, okay? And I'm going to blend where I have this curve. So the next thing I'm going to do now is to create the neckline. So as it is now, if you want to leave the top as it is now, you can leave it as it is, but since this is a corset, okay, so we are going to determine how deep we want the neck to be, and I want it to be as deep as 7 inches. So from that 7 inches, I'm going to be marking the bust separation of half an inch on fold. When I open it up, it's going to be 1 inch. So I'm just going to use my marker to mark it so that we can see it. All right, you can see the bust separation of half an inch. So from there now, I'm going to start taking our corset mark. All right, I've used my pencil to mark it, and on the other side, I'm going to mark out my actual bust, the cutter of my bust. Okay, I'm going to mark it, and from that armhole area, you can see this part. I'm going to measure what I have there and divide it into 2. So whatever I have, I'm going to curve that to the under bust area. Just watch what I'm doing. All right, you curve it from that mark to the under bust area. So I'm also going to use my marker to highlight this place as well. So you should have something like this after curving, after using your French curve to curve the mark. So I'm going to mark the neckline now. If you want yours to be more curvier than this, you can always make it curvier than this if you want, okay? So right here, this is my neckline, but I'm not going to leave it like this. So what I'm going to do now is to mark what I have on this part, the part that falls to the armhole area. I'm going to mark what I have at the neck area to the bust point, and what I have there is about 3¾ and I'm going to mark it on the other side of the dart as well. So you can see I don't have up to that, so I'm going to mark where that 3¾ stops. So by doing that, the two cups are going to match up with each other when I'm joining together. So that is a new neck for this side of the cup, okay? By the time you join it, it will match up with each other. So once that is done, I'll go ahead now and add half an inch sewing allowance to the top, so that when I'm cutting on fabric, I don't need to add any allowance to it. So the only part I'm going to be adding allowance to is going to be on the cup, on the corset cup, and at the front of the dart. So you're going to add sewing allowance to this part here, and at the side of the cup, and also at the front of the cup, okay? And you do the same thing for the other parts of this corset. So once that is done, you should have something like this, okay? Make sure you had your sewing allowance. So I have the back here, and I've marked all the lines I marked at the front. I've also marked it at the back. So I'm marking half inch on both sides at the under bust and also at the top length, and I'm going to roll the mark together, and I'm going to stop the dart at the chest line, which is 7½. Okay, so I'm going to roll the mark up. So once that is done, the next thing we are going to do is to also create the neck. Remember, I use 5 inches for the neck, so I'm going to mark the 5 inches, and I'm going to stop at the chest line. All right, just as we did at the front. So you connect it together before you can, create the armhole curve. So I want to create the depth of the back neck, and I'm going to be using 7½. So just go ahead now and curve it out like this. If you want a V shape, you can create it if you want, and if you want it to come down than this, you can go ahead. So I decided to make my come down a little bit by half an inch, so that is why I'm recurving it, as you can see in the video. So once this is done, I'm going to take the cutter of my bust measurement plus the sewing allowance. Okay, since we are not taking any dart away here, so there is no need of adding any dart intake at the bust. At the under bust, you should add the dart intake you took away there plus the sewing allowance, and I'll do the same thing at the lower part of the top as well. So you also go up by 1.5 inch and then curve it down, just the same thing we did at the front. Now go ahead and take in the armhole curve. So right here I'm marking 1/2 inch at the neck area, at the back neck area, as seam allowance. All right, so you should have something like this. Now to avoid zipper bulge at the back, okay, so what I'm going to do now is to mark 1/2 inch at the waist area. I'll go in from the zipper allowance, okay, I'll go in by 1/2 inch, and I'm also going to mark where I have my waist. I marked 1/2 inch at the other under bust, and at the waist you also mark 1/2 inch, and you connect the lines together like this, and then you also connect it up to avoid zipper bulge. Now that 1/2 inch we took away at the zipper allowance, you should also add it back to the side seam so that it will not affect your side seam by the time you are stitching together. So I'll go ahead now and cut this out. So after cutting out, you should have something like this. So when you are cutting this on the fabric, make sure you had sewing allowance to the front of the dart on both sides. All right, and at the top here I forgot to increase this side, the side that has the zipper allowance. Make sure you increase the neck area up a little bit so that it can match up with the other side when you are joining. So I'm going to add it on the fabric when I'm cutting this on the fabric, so that when I join it together it will be equal. All right, so guys, I'm going to be cutting the sleeve, and I'm adding extra 6 inches up to 8 inches for gathers at the sleeve. And after that you're going to mark half of your round armhole, and mine is 8 inches. Now from the top of the sleeve I mark 1 inch as the elastic casing, and from there I came down by 3.5, which is my sleeve cap, okay, and from 3.5 I marked the 5 inches we took as the neckline. You mark it out, and then you connect from that 5 inches to the cap sleeve to determine the armhole area for the sleeve, okay, and then you go ahead and curve it together. So to get your sleeve curve, just divide your bust divided by 12. Whatever you have is going to be your sleeve cap, and mine is 3.5. And I'm going to separate the two sleeves together because I'm cutting the two together. So right here I'm going to mark 5 inches upward, and as well I will mark 7 inches upward. So that means I'll be having about 2 inches interval, okay. I'll mark 7 inches and also mark 5 inches, and you're going to be marking this on the right side of the fabric. And after doing that, I'm going to use the elastic thread to sew on this part, which means I'm going to be stitching this about 4 times, okay. I'll be running an elastic stitch on that 2 inches interval 4 times. So right here is my pattern paper. I've used my pattern paper to cut out the fabric and as well cut out the stay as well. I'm going to iron the stay on the fabric and also use it to cut out the lining. So here are the cups as well. I also use the pattern to cut out the cups. Now to cut out the wording, you're going to also use the pattern paper to cut out the wording, because the wording is not going to have sewing allowance. So if you want to learn how I cut out this wording, I'm going to put up another video to teach us how to do this. So thank you guys for watching this video to the end, and I'm going to see you guys in my next tutorial where I'm going to teach us how to sew all of this together. I'll see you guys in my next video. Bye, and make sure you subscribe.